Okay, Temporary Chair Robinson, we are ready to start when you are.
All right, thank you. Welcome back, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm opening our Bellevue City Council meeting for January 3rd, 2022. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Robertson. I'm sorry, Councilmember Robinson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes, will you please lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
Yes.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So first on our agenda is the election of the mayor and the deputy mayor. And I have quite a bit to read here, so bear with me. As temporary chair, you'll recall on December 13th, 2021, the council meeting selected me to be the temporary chair to preside over the election of the mayor, which is the first item of business tonight. For those of you not wholly familiar with how Bellevue is governed, we follow the council manager form of government, which calls for the mayor to be elected from among our 7 council members by our 7 council members every 2 years. The mayor acts as the city council's presiding officer, represents the city in a number of forums, and performs a number of ceremonial roles. At the conclusion of tonight's election of the mayor, the new mayor will take the gavel and preside over the election of the deputy mayor. At the December 13th meeting, the council voted to amend our rules to put in place an alternative method of conducting the election this evening. This method is characterized by voting on all nominees simultaneously instead of one vote at a time, and the votes will be conducted using roll call voting. So tonight's election will proceed as follows. As temporary chair, I will call for nominations for the position of mayor. Nominations do not require a second. Each council member may nominate no more than one person for the position of mayor. Council members are allowed to nominate themselves for the position. When no other nominations are forthcoming, I will close the floor to nominations. Once nominations are closed, the council will vote on the candidates. Even if there is only one candidate, the council must still conduct a vote. The city clerk will call each council member in alphabetical order. When your name is called, you must state the name of the candidate you wish to vote for. At the end of roll call vote, the city clerk will announce the results. Once all council members have voted, if a council member receives a majority vote, that is at least 4 votes, he or she will be declared elected, and the new mayor will assume the gavel and repeat these steps to elect the deputy mayor. If the council does not select a mayor from the first round of balloting, the balloting will be repeated using the same process as many times as necessary to obtain a majority vote for a single candidate. After several rounds of balloting with no clear majority, or if there is a tie, we may take a brief recess. Nominations may be reopened by a majority vote of council, and any new nominations will be added to the list of original nominees. Any questions about the process? Okay. So now we'll go ahead and do nominations. Are there any nominations for mayor? Councilmember Stokes.
Madam Chair, I nominate Lynn Robinson for the position of mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes nominates Councilmember Robinson. Any other nominations? Just checking. Okay, not seeing any. We will proceed with the vote. So clerk, would you please do the voting process, roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. As Councilmember Robinson stated, there is only one candidate, Councilmember Robinson. I will call each of you in alphabetical order. Councilmember Barksdale, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, who do you vote for?
Yay for Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. Councilmember Neuenhouse, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Robinson, gladly.
Thank you. Councilmember Robinson, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Robinson, thank you.
Councilmember Stokes. Who do you
Councilmember
vote
Robinson.
for? Thank you. And Councilmember Zahn, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Robinson has achieved a majority of votes and she is elected mayor. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to see the actual, what we described of the rounds, the multiple rounds of voting, taking a break and going back to voting, go back to 8 years ago and you can see that in process. Okay, so now we're gonna go and do the same thing, only this is for deputy mayor. And everything that I said about the mayor election is the same for the deputy mayor election. And so I'm gonna ask first if there are any questions about electing the deputy mayor. Okay, seeing none, are there any nominations for deputy mayor? Councilmember Robertson and then followed Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I nominate Councilmember Neuenhouse for deputy mayor. I think the two of you have done an excellent job leading the council the last 2 years, and I'd like to see that continue.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
I nominate Councilmember Janice Zahn. I didn't realize we could make comments on this. I think it's Councilmember Zahn has served on committees and served very well in the council. And I think there are, she would be a great addition, and it's, nice to have some change.
Okay. Any other nominations? All right, clerk, would you like to do the roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. There are two candidates for position of deputy mayor, Councilmember Neuenhouse and Councilmember Zahn. We'll go through each alphabetically. Councilmember Barksdale, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Zahn.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee, who do you vote for?
Yay for Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Thank you. Councilmember Neuenhouse, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Thank you. Mayor Robinson, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Zahn.
Thank you. And Councilmember Zahn, who do you vote for?
Councilmember Zahn.
Thank you. With Councilmember Neuenhouse receiving 4 votes and Councilmember Zahn receiving 3 votes, Councilmember Neuenhouse is elected deputy mayor.
Congratulations.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and we're on to oral communications. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening there is one pre-registered speaker, and that is Christian Dorset. And I do not see him connected. Mr. Dorset, if you are connected under a different name, can you please use the raise hand function so I can locate you? I do not see a hand. So that is the end of our pre-registered list. If there is anyone else connected to this call who would like to make a comment to the council, please use the raise hand function. I see one hand, and that is Ms. Johnston, Pamela Johnston. Can you hear me? Ms. Johnston, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Oh, great. We can hear you now. Your time begins now.
Okay. I would first like to state that I'm speaking for myself and not the Bridal Trust Community Club because I'm co-president of that organization. In 2012, Itcher City listed a project to replace the Pikes Peak Water Reservoir in Bridal Trail State Park, going from 1 megagallon to 3 million gallons in 2013. It was a project that just had to be done, systemic issues, volume, etc. The Bridal Trust Community Club, the Bridal Trust Foundation, and direct neighbors knew nothing about it. Why should they? It was just an engineering project. The engineering process had trail uses, aesthetics, environmental concerns, all concerns for the community. It was a just get it done process that had long-term infrastructure needs. Only after collaboration was it understood by all, the level of understanding and basic trust that resulted in the innovation planning, best shared plan, and continued success of the project. Today, we have housing need. While I understand the need for more housing and to consider zoning changes, I know that we're urged by just do something about zoning. Will DADUs fulfill that need? I think we need to look at past projects that was successful. DADUs intersect many policy areas. Like the water tower, it's not simple, it's not a shortcut. It cannot simply decide the right and wrong solution based on a multiple choice questions. Is it a right fit for Bellevue? Is it fit our economics? We've learned that Bellevue's long-term level of commitment to high quality and living in such areas of equity in its parks is very different than other cities in the state. Do we understand each other? Have we made common definitions, scopes, and goals? Think of people thinking about DADUs versus bed and breakfasts. Have we analyzed the current data? Do we understand the environmental cross-department long-term impact? California laws are showing that holes in their permitting, such as things as SEPA and outreach. Will it take all the stakeholders to be engaged? DADUs are part of a 4-year process for Seattle. What I request from council is to clarify the priorities for housing, advocate for a successful process, define housing equity, request current data on housing and housing equity, take a strong position on local control at the state legislature and local planning. Why not prioritize affordable housing measures that make a big difference? Downtown, Bell Red, East Main were a focus. Why aren't Bell Red and Wilburton commercial areas of focus now? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. There are no additional hands. I would ask one more time if there's anyone else who would like to make communication to the council, please use the raise hand function. And I do not see any additional hands, so that would close oral communications.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a report of the city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and council members. I have one item. As council is aware, we had a fairly major storm event over the holiday that dumped 10 plus inches of snow over the city. That's as of last Thursday. Tonight, I just wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge all the city staff that work 24/7 throughout the holiday season in order to clear our roads and to just provide what we consider exceptional public service to our residences and businesses. And I wanted to just mention that next week we'll provide a more in-depth report on our response to the snow event. And that's all I have to report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that the community is very interested to know what our response was to the homeless individuals in our community as well. So I hope that we can include that in your report next week.
Can do.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Council, okay, yes, council business. So Councilmember Lee, I believe you are making a recommendation for an appointment to Environmental Services Commission. Would you like to introduce your recommendation?
Yes, Madam Mayor, congratulations.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure and to introduce the following recommendation to the council to fill a partially unexpired term on the Environmental Services Commission. I want to thank the Chair, Vanya, for her input and help me in the selection process. And we obviously are very fortunate to have a great pool of applicants. And we, after interviewing several individuals, we were very, very glad and pleased to recommend Mr. Andy Dupertus to serve out a partial term expiring on May 31, 2025. So if the mayor allows me, I would like to make a motion to nominate and appoint Mr. Dupertus in this position.
Yes, I'll take that as a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. We have a new commissioner then. Terrific. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we have 2 study session items. Mr. Miyake, I'll let you introduce those.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and council members. The first item is the Transportation Commission's 2022 through 2033 Transportation Facilities Plan preliminary project list. The Transportation Facilities Plan, by way of background, also known as the TFP, is the city's 12-year intermediate range capital facilities plans of priority transportation projects, which the Transportation Commission is actually charged with updating every 2 to 3 years. The Commission began the process of updating the TFP back in September of 2020, and tonight the staff and the Transportation Commission are seeking council direction to proceed with the TFP update process, as well as pursue the environmental review phase based on the list that is recommended by the Commission this evening. Joining us this evening are Mike Ingram, who is the Senior Planner in our Transportation Department. He is joined by Loriana Marciante, who is the Chair of the Transportation Commission. Both will be presenting this night. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
I don't hear you, Mike. Let's see, is Mike talking at this point?
Now I have it. Sorry about that.
Okay, good.
So, good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, members of the council. So as City Manager Miyake mentioned, I'm planner in the Transportation Department, and I'm joined tonight by the Chair of our Transportation Commission, Loriana Marciante, and we're here to share with you the process that we've been working on to update the city's transportation facilities plan. So the Commission has recommended a list of priority projects, and we'll share with you the process that we use to develop this list of projects and walk through the projects that are on the list, so you have an understanding of how we got the list that we were sharing and what's in it. Specifically, what we're seeking tonight is direction from the council to proceed with the TFP update process and pursue the environmental review phase based on this project list. So tonight we'll walk through, briefly we'll look at where the TFP fits in the city's transportation capital programming process. We'll look at the timeline for this particular update cycle. We'll look at the revenue that we are forecasting to be available for the TFP timeframe. We will look at the projects, how we identified candidates and how we then evaluated projects to develop this list. And we'll look at the component projects of the list itself. We will stop for questions after item 4, so that's at slide 10. And then also after we've walked through the list of recommended projects, that'll be slide 19. The Transportation Facilities Plan is financially constrained, as I mentioned. So it's really, we can only include in this plan the projects or the components of projects that we can reasonably expect to pay for and to afford in that 12-year period. So it's our first cut at taking all the many projects that we've identified in long-range plans and in our modal plans and determining what really are the priorities for the 12 years, can we afford to do in this plan period. With each update of the transportation facilities plan, we do an environmental review, and that includes a look 12 years out at how we expect the transportation system will perform. So with all the growth that we expect and the amount of demand that we expect to have on the system in 12 years, so 2033 in this case, how do we expect the system to perform? And that's part of the environmental analysis. We've done a little bit of work on that so far, but not thoroughly yet. That'll be the next phase. And then finally, the transportation facilities plan includes a subset of the projects in the transportation facilities plan, those that serve vehicular capacity needs and that are needed at least in part to serve new development are designated as impact fee projects. And that impact fee project list then is a key component of our impact fee program. And this is how we update that list on a periodic basis. For the current TFP process, we started in September of 2020 with the Transportation Commission. And over the course of 10 meetings, we went through a number of steps, and we'll summarize, we'll evaluate those or look at those here in the next few slides. But over the course of 10 meetings, we ended up with the project list that we'll share tonight, endorsed, and that was endorsed by the Transportation Commission at their meeting in late October. So if we're given the approval to proceed tonight, we will be back in summer with a request to adopt the new TFP. So one of the first things we look at in the transportation facilities plan process is how much money we think we'll have available in the plan period. So we work with our finance staff and look at the various revenue sources that are available for transportation capital programming, capital needs. And for this 12-year period, the total amount available is $303 million. When we then further drill down at the plan period, the first 6 years essentially are already programmed in the CIP. So through 2027, the council has already identified what the priorities are and how much to spend. So the additional revenue that's really available in those out years from 2028 to 2033, we anticipate to be $139 million. That's what we came to with our finance staff. So that's the additional amount that we had to work with for the TFP process that we'll walk through here in the next few slides. We, for the purposes of this TFP process and really each TFP cycle, we start by looking at the pool of candidate projects, and those come from the current TFP. They come from the Comprehensive Transportation Project List, which now has been replaced by the TIP through action you took last month. But nonetheless, the projects on the list are essentially there and what's identified. We look at the Transit Master Plan and the Ped Bike Plan, which have been adopted by the council. And we also work with staff in the Transportation Department who do ongoing work to evaluate neighborhood congestion points and scope and identify potential projects to alleviate congestion at key areas around the city. As well as then any emerging needs or opportunities that staff bring to our attention, that the commission becomes aware of, or that's brought to our attention through the public process. At this point, I will now turn the discussion over to Transportation Commission Chair Marciante, who who will discuss the evaluation process and the projects that are in our recommended list.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us here tonight. So the project evaluation process, we started off by, we have these criteria that the commission develops, ranking or weighted criteria. And so for this round, the commission decided to maintain the previous criteria. So there was no change from the previous TFP process. And you can see them here: safety, level of service, safety 30%, 20%, transit 20%, then bike 20%, and then 10%, which allows us to identify projects that are competitive for a grant process and other elements. And then there's other considerations that are qualitative. If there has been significant investment in the project to date, whether it be public process or actual dollars the city has spent. Also ability, when there's a project, there might be an opportunity to coordinate with other agencies such as WSDOT, and we'll see some examples of those. And then also take into considerations public input. And to talk a little bit more about the public input, we have for this TFP process, there was a pretty extensive public input. There was one online open house, and then a TFP online survey as well, where you could see that an interactive project map. Then the TFP was on our agenda for the Transportation Commission for 10 meetings, and the public can participate there as well as they have in the past and provide comment when the TFP is on the agenda. And we also take into consideration what the citizens, the information they provide through the city budget survey as part of public input and what's important. If you want a full report of this, is available in the council library. So more details on this is in that report on public outreach and public comments that you have available. And now I think it's time to get into the projects a little bit. There are 71 projects. My intent is not to go through each one of them. That would be too detailed, but staff has provided a set of themes, I would say. Now some of our projects are multimodal and might fall into one or the other. So I'll talk about that as I go when you see this. But it helps to separate them into different themes to simply be able to see it against the map. So Mike, if we could go through, the first one should be familiar to you, perhaps, is the 16 projects that are fully funded in the current 2021-2027 CIP. And at this point, I want to just stop for a moment and talk about the legend as well. As you can see in the legend, there are 3 different colors. Purple, that's more of the roadway intersection projects. The pedestrian are orange, and the bicycle projects are green. And then each of those has a different shade. If they are dark shade, that means the project has been fully funded. So all of the projects you see here are in the dark shade. And you'll see some of the projects in the next section where there might not be fully funded through the TFP cycle, but there might be some early, perhaps planning funding, design funding, and early allocation. So that project, if you see it in a light shade, it means it is not fully funded through the TFP cycle. So the next element that you can see, if you go to the next slide, Mike, the 14 priority projects that support growth and mitigate congestion. So these are essentially where our growth areas are at the moment: downtown, the Bellevue corridor, and of course the Bellevue Way is experiencing a lot of congestion. Will continue to do so as our downtown grows and more access is needed into I-90. So these are the projects that you're seeing on the screen right now. Some are fully funded and some are not. Then the next set of projects, they're similar, but they mitigate impacts of growth more in the residential areas. And so there are places where at peak hour, residents from those neighborhoods are having a hard time accessing their homes. And so these are these are 5 projects that are specifically to mitigate growth in those areas. And then the next set of projects are projects that are to be implemented with others. In this case is WashDOT. You can see to be implemented in conjunction. They're all around WashDOT facilities. So those are what the projects are identifying areas of opportunity where we can leverage WashDOT investments to perform additional projects. The next category are 9 projects to improve transit, and 7 of those projects are really directly from the master plan, the sort of connectivity centers that are in the transit master plan, and another 2 are an actual capital project. So in terms of what you see on the map, I also wanted to clarify, these lines represent existing routes that are currently connecting some of these 7 centers, but that doesn't mean that the final route or the final solution will be exactly on that location or serve that particular route. So I just wanted to clarify to make sure that that's not misunderstood in that way. And you also see the route continues. So you're showing the full route, whereas so it's not exactly from center to center. As you can see, they go beyond our borders because that's what the current transit line does. And then the next one that we have is the pedestrian network. And might feel like 4 is too small, but these are actually projects that are just pedestrian. There are a lot of projects, intersections and roadways that create sidewalk improvements, as well as bicycle projects that create sidewalk improvements. So in some cases, a lot of these projects are already multimodal. So it's deceiving to just sort of think that this is just 4. And I'm going to talk about another set of programs where projects might not yet be identified, but we have some reserve allocation. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. And then the last set of projects are bicycle projects to build out the bicycle network. And here you not only see specific routes, but there are 3 distinct bicycle network areas that are sort of in the shaded area. And I've got some notes about what those are exactly called. So we have the Growth Corridor Bike Network. It's that one is fully funded and currently in the CIP. And then there are the other 2, which is this East Bellevue Bicycle Network and the South Bellevue Bicycle Network. And so rather than thinking of bicycle projects as distinct routes, is the trend is to start thinking about this as networks and connectivity. And so this provides opportunity to really build out these networks in these different areas of our city that really need it. And then the last element, if we could go on to, this is our reserve allocation. So these are projects that are not truly identified yet. We have a congestion reduction levy placeholder. So over that period, 15.9 million is allocated to projects that come from the congestion reduction levy that are not yet identified, but hopefully will be by then. There's our neighborhood sidewalk program that improves a number of sidewalks, is continuously improving sidewalks along the city. And so those projects might not yet be identified, but that's 18.3 million for that one. And then the transit master plan has a transit connections reserve. And so that's the 7 that I talked about. The 2 million can be used for any of those 7 connections from the transit master plan. And that is hopefully a concise way of sharing our 71 projects that we have. And I believe we're going to take a pause here and see if you have any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Marciante, for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and go down the list here, starting with Councilmember Robertson, who is the liaison to the Transportation Commission, and then Councilmember Zahn, Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Stokes, Councilmember Barksdale, Councilmember Lee, and then myself. So Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chair Marciante, for coming tonight, and Happy New Year. So just really pleased to see this. I don't really have any questions, but really pleased to see this come forward. I think it's going to time out nicely with our budget. This is, as we all know, this is a budget year this year. And I just really wanted to praise the commission for its work. They have been listening to council discussions and to the public, and looked at how to value the different projects, including looking at safety, highly rating that, making sure that this TFP is a truly multimodal plan. So, I like I said, no questions, really pleased with the work. After we finish discussion, I would be happy to make the motion to move this on to the next step so that they can do the environmental review and get this finalized so it can be cranked into our budget for evaluation and finalization this year. So.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I also appreciate the work of the Transportation Commission. I know how challenging it can be to go through a long list of projects to really put it together in a way that is clear and understood. I love the maps, and that we're looking at performance metrics from a mobility implementation standpoint. One thing I guess I would like to get from staff at another time is I like seeing the transit connection map of the projects. I think it would be helpful to also see the same thing for the bike network, just so we can see when we have these projects implemented, what the whole grid looks like from the standpoint of connectivity and access, similar to the transit one. I appreciate seeing that TFP 290, which is a placeholder for future Vision Zero projects in there. My question would be whether in the TFP $4.6 million over the 12 years is sufficient, because what we've certainly seen is that from a traffic incident standpoint, we're seeing actually nationwide more and more concerns related to that. So Vision Zero, as currently budgeted, may not be sufficient for looking at those, the areas of more vulnerability from a predictive standpoint. And then my other question would be the Northeast Mountain to Sound Greenway. I don't see the connection that the more expensive one that's going to go across 148th, 150th. So is that already in the plan somewhere, or is that section just completely not even in our 12-year horizon?
I could step in and just briefly answer that. We have included the entire Mountain Sound Gap in the TFP. The part that's, and we also included then full funding for the segment from 142nd place to 150th.
Okay, so that includes going across that really wide interchange, right? Or the intersection.
I think it does
anyway,
not include doesn't include the elevated structure.
Okay,
That's
so I would say that as we look at it, that is one of the areas of interest, is to make sure that we actually look holistically at what would it take to actually go all the way across, because if we have segments going up to it and then you still have to cross that pretty gnarly intersection to go east. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Mike and Chair Marciante, for your presentation and for all your good work so far. Yeah, I would echo the comments by Councilmember Zahn. I'm very excited about the 18 projects as related to the bike network, but I certainly would like to see that map and see how they're all connecting or not connecting. That would be great to see. Love the balance of the different projects. in terms of balancing the safety, vehicles, pedestrian, bike, transit, and then that plan consistency. So very, very good approach. My one question that I had at this point was in terms of outreach. You had mentioned a couple of different outreach items here, but I'm kind of curious, how many people did we actually hear from during the process, and not just residents, but also from stakeholders as well? Could you dive a little bit deeper into that in terms of numbers, but also in terms of different stakeholders and some of their thoughts and concerns about the plan?
I can speak to that. So we received responses from over 200 distinct respondents to the survey.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact number in my head right now. I want to say 230 some. And we received several hundred specific comments regarding projects. So it's a pretty good number. It's down a little bit from last TFP cycles when we actually were able to go out into the community and hold in-person open houses. We usually do 3 of them in person. We had to do it obviously all online this time. So it fell off a little bit, but we felt like it was still a pretty thorough input that we got.
Okay, and stakeholder groups? Can you mention some of those?
So we did receive communication from from residents and from members of the business community. They were interested in various projects. We did not do actually any specific briefings to boards or community groups. We have not done that in the past either, except when invited. And so we did not reach out and offer that this time.
Okay. I would suggest there might be that might be part of the process going forward. I think that'd be great to hear from those groups, especially those groups that have a certain expertise. That would be good to hear their feedback. Be it either Chamber, Cascade, you name it. I think there's a lot of different groups out there that would like to share their opinion. I think it'd be great if we could do some outreach to them versus waiting for others to respond going forward. But again, I think it's a great presentation, great plan so far, and look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
I first have to unmute. Yeah, I appreciate the comments that have already been made. I think this is it's always an amazing process, and having gone through several of these, this is a very well done one. I had some questions that I've heard and from other people and talking about this and looking at it, and when this is a lot of money, it's a long time period. Before I go to that and forget it, I appreciate the Deputy Mayor's comments there. I do want to point out that actually the Chamber of Commerce has a very active transportation group that has worked with us, and I've worked with them in the past on this, and others in the council as well. But we need to always make sure that we talk with them and Downtown Business Association, and I think the businesses as a whole have been involved, but it is always important to get them in there as well as people in the community. We've done a lot. And after the levy, I think we did a lot of communication on that, and then going forward, and the commission has done a lot. So it's always good to point that out, and just to make sure we don't sometimes let it slide, because it is important to have people understand this. This is complex. I mean, you're looking at a lot of money. One of the questions I had, big question is, and I know you've gone over this, but it would be good to have some context of what are the needs versus resources. And the other thing, when I talk to people about this, or sometimes they look at it and they say, well, how can you plan, and why is it, we're planning for things 6 years out, 12 years out. And we know if we look back at the last 12 years, things have changed dramatically. And so it's always that question, how do we keep up with this? I guess my big question is, I'd like to talk about this in the budget going forward. And in the next few years is this really adequate? Are we kind of catching up with things, or are we really looking forward because the development and the change and the patterns and the needs and frankly, the number of people using transportation in Bellevue is so much different from just 5 years ago. And I just want to make sure that it's great planning, but are we being, is this adequate? The other question I had is, I know that these next 6 years, we have, 163.9 million. And then the next 6 years after that's only 140 million. And we know we're going to have a lot more people and a lot more transportation questions and things going on. And I guess the answer you give somebody is that it's, to a certain extent, it's kind of a projection and placeholder. It's not a real number in a sense like the 163.9, because that's pretty going out. Is that the chair, commission chair, is that pretty much a good assessment of that part?
Actually, I can probably answer that.
Okay.
So a couple of things. Yes, we are being somewhat, we think, prudent and conservative in what revenue we anticipate. So that's part of the picture. We have, but the other part of the picture of why there's that difference, and let me just go up there so we all remember what we're looking at here. So the 164 versus the 139 in the out years is the current CIP includes the entire cost of projects. So when we look at the list of projects that was included in that packet that you got for this presentation tonight, when you see a project, it's the full cost of the project. And in some cases, we started work on the project prior to 2021 or 2022. And so that's why that number is somewhat larger, because for projects that were in process, the prior year's money was still embedded in that project total. So when you see a project, you're seeing the actual cost of the project. When you see a project on that list, you are seeing the cost of the project, not just the truncated costs starting in 2022, if that makes sense.
Right, right.
So
well, the other part of that is when people are looking at this, this is, I mean, it's pretty well etched in stone to a certain extent, but obviously we go over these every couple of years.
Yes.
And so I think people need to understand that too. It's sometimes it's a little mind-boggling to understand how this goes, and it's an ongoing process. And again, just kudos to both the commission and the staff or department for moving this along, and hopefully the council has been helpful on that part of it. But I think it's very exciting. As I say, what I'm really interested in is just making sure that we have the flexibility and that we have the boldness to look forward and come back on this. And I think hopefully next year in the budget, that's where we can have some good conversations about the future and resources and how do we adapt. But I think it's an excellent overall program and process, and kudos to both the commission and staff for bringing this forward. And we will try to match you in doing the work on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
And if I could answer Councilmember Stokes, I think you had it exactly right, and I don't want to miss an opportunity. This TFP, the CIP, as Mike was discussing, are the projects that you have approved in your budget. There are a budgetary process that makes it fully funded. The work that we do is starting to identify and shape needs and opportunities. So they're not already defined projects. When you're looking 12 years out, it's a planning tool to identify, we're looking at something that might be a problem, let's figure out how we can do it. And so staff, the light shade is a potential need that we don't quite know how to solve just yet. And so we need to get that ready for you to make that consideration of the final funding, and also for us to pursue grant funds, external funds. So in the future years, yes, there might be more funding available for these projects because we'll go for additional grant funding, or it will be the council's job to compare the need and the needs that we're starting to see with the TFP and how far along we can get to the actual growth and challenges. And so I just wanted to say, I think that's really good way of looking at it. It's not etched in stone, but it is a planning tool that allows us to get to a set of capital projects for the budget consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Also, thanks to the commission and staff for the work on this. A couple points. One, the idea of having the existing networks in to reference would be helpful, as Councilmember Zahn mentioned. I like the interactive approach that you went through with the slides. I'd love to have that as part of that in the future. But also the scoring. So I looked at the list, but I didn't see the scoring. So I would love to see the scoring that's applied to each one of the items. This gets me to a question around the evaluation criteria and that safety, and a clarifying question around multimodal. So safety is pretty broad, so I get why it's 30%. I just want to clarify, one, that safety is not just vehicular safety, but also bike ped safety as well. And then the second clarifying question I had was around multimodal. So when we look at the map, it looks like, and I know you mentioned, Chair, that it is a multimodal list. Across projects, it looks multimodal, but I was curious if within per project, is it also multimodal? So that was a clarifying question I had.
Sometimes, I would say, because some projects include, sidewalks and bicycle network and an improvement of some sort to the road network. But that's.
So I can address those two questions, Councilmember Barksdale. In terms of safety, yes, absolutely. We're looking at safety for all users, pedestrians, vulnerable users, pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as motorists. And so with each project, we're looking, what is the need for safety? Is there a history of a problem here? Do we know if there's a safety issue or concern? And then does the project that we've identified, does that project, to what extent does it really address that concern? So it's a need and a benefit evaluation. We have a matrix, and that's how we determine the scoring for safety, which it goes across all the modes. And I'm sorry, you had a second question.
Yeah, and I can amend to it just really slightly. That multimodal is not just across the projects, but per project. And just to add to that, is the conclusion, is it accurate to say that, like, if it's multimodal, it bubbles up higher on the list because it meets more of these criteria implicitly?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
So a project that only benefits vehicles and that offers, is maybe at a location where we don't have transit service, there'd be no benefit to transit, it wouldn't move faster. It would get 0 on transit. If we already have the PED facilities in place and we don't think we want or need bike facilities, or they're already there, and there's no net improvement for PEDs or bikes, it would get 0 on that. So it would only score on the vehicle side.
Got it.
So yeah, for each project, we're looking at the extent to which it benefits each of those modes.
Awesome. And that's sort of the foundation to my question, or interest in seeing the scoring as well, just to kind of see how that maps out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Happy New Year, Chair Loriana. Thank you. Thank you for your concise presentation. And my question is kind of relates to the criteria you're talking about. You mentioned it's the same as before. So how is that criteria established, and how often does the criteria change, and what is the significance of the criteria? Because I have a little bit of confusion based on the last question asked by Councilmember Barksdale. If it's a scoring criteria, and if the multimodal gets all the points or most of the points, and if it's not a multimodal, if it's only single modal issue, it's never going to score very high. So I don't know whether that's meant for that purpose. I believe, so maybe you can clarify that a bit.
Yeah.
I think my understanding, I'm not going to say
Yeah,
anymore,
and
but
I can take the history, Mike.
yeah, please,
if
please.
you- yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Just
So
from
the
my
history,
understanding, I think that's good. Very well balanced. Very well balanced.
So this I would say was the major tool that as Transportation Commission we've had. I've been part of this process for about 2 or 3 rounds. And we've gone into a lot of detailed conversations in the past. And so I can say that sometimes level of service used to be higher and transit and ped lower and things change and plan consistency might have been only 5%. So this percentage is the piece that the Transportation Commission usually most looked at and debated. I believe this year, I guess we hit a good allocation because we all felt it was good the way it was. Again, safety we feel is very important. It's something that should have the most weighting. A safety issue should have the most weighting. And then particular modes, we just simply split it the same to all of them. And that means that, yes, projects that can address all of them would do better, but it also doesn't prioritize transit over a ped bike project, et cetera. And so it starts to guide us to that multimodal feeling. It doesn't mean that all projects, most of our projects don't address all of them. So it just gives us a sense of balance and make sure we're not prioritizing one mode over the other by having a consistent weighting across the 3. So that's the way that the commission has discussed this in the past, and we have freedom to set this. I'm very excited, and I'm about to show you in the next slide some of the early MMLOS ratings and how we're going to do it in the future, because we got an opportunity to take a sneak peek with this TFP on those measures. And so we're moving towards a much more measure-driven, transparent way of evaluating our needs and what needs to be prioritized, rather than what you're seeing here today and what we've used in the past. So I'm actually really excited about the next round where we can start fresh with all those MMLOS metrics, hopefully. But yes, that's how we've done it so far, and that was the general sentiment of the commission of how these percentages got set originally, and it seemed like a good approach for this TFP cycle as well.
Yeah, I'm eager to look forward to what you're talking about. As you recall, the last month we had some pretty stimulating conversation on the council about reducing congestion or managing congestion. So, that falls into the category of what you're talking about, right? So that reflects in the choice that you make on the TFP. What projects do you pick? How do they fit into the specific goal that we all, agree to or would like to support? And I think that's one of the reasons why Deputy Mayor was asking about the community input, stakeholders, all that, where do we stand? How do we look at? And how does it translate into your selection criteria? I think that's very important. But whatever we do, I think you're on the right track. We need to articulate that, explain that so people understand what it is. So we don't need to be confused and nitpicking on words, right? So it's important to know what actually we understand the intent of what we want to do and how we're going to accomplish, our goal. Thank you very much. So we're looking forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. So I'll just add, this is kind of continuing what Councilmember Lee was saying as well. As somebody who primarily bikes and walks in downtown Bellevue, I would venture to say that any ped or bike project is a safety project, or at least a great majority of them are. So I'm just kind of wondering how you differentiate between that. And my second question is, on Southeast 8th, I see that that's something that we can't expect to be completed before 2023. We really don't have a safe east-west cross 405 pathway right now. The only one I can think of is, well, the two are at the north end and the south end of our city, but there's nothing kind of in the middle. And that Southeast 8th is just so dangerous, but also really so vital for people who commute and come off the Lake Hills Connector or come off of 114th, all those routes. So I'm wondering, you know, how do we expedite a project like that? Is there anything? I mean, it seems to me that that's a big safety project in my eyes. So just your thoughts on that, please.
Yes, we do have a project on Southeast 8th, as you noted. And in that project, we included an allocation sufficient to make the improvements from 114th Avenue east to Lake Hills Connector. Timeline-wise, we unfortunately need to wait until after the WashDOT work is completed under the freeway. We tried at the staff level to work with the contractor and get them to do the work for us, but they really weren't able to offer the kind of price that would seem reasonable. So we'll have to wait until they're done, and then we'll go in and do the work. And so that's why that is still a couple, 3 years out.
Thank you for that explanation, Mike. And can I just ask that when that construction is underway, that there is really good signage for the cyclists and peds, so they know exactly where they can go that would be safe for them? Because a lot of times that's left out of the equation, and I think there it's going to be super important.
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, so do you have more presentation to continue on with here?
We have one more key point.
Okay, go ahead then. Thank you.
Yeah, so all we wanted to do to close this off is to share, we got an opportunity to use the MMLOS performance metrics on this TFP. So just to clarify, the mobility implementation plan was happening at the same time as this TFP was happening. So we used the evaluation process, did not include this performance measures. But once we had the TFP ready, staff got an opportunity to run the performance measures in comparison. And so personally, I was really nervous the entire year, not knowing how it was going to turn out. And so I was pleasantly surprised and excited to show how this MMLOS metrics are starting to show in a much more comprehensive way what the network needs and how we're doing with our TFP, how we're performing. So in terms of the vehicular analysis, we did see that the proposed projects, just generally the location of the proposed projects, is where the system performance is expected to be worse in the future. Now, we have no way of knowing if that particular project is exactly going to be what that needs, but the fact that it's in the TFP allows us to prioritize the design and the solution for that location. So that was very exciting to see. Then we also know that these transit investments of this TFP will improve the performance of the connectivity and some of the OD pairs that we've already identified. So we could see that based on, the baseline and what we do with the TFP, we can see that transit performance does improve thanks to these investments that we've talked about today. That was also very exciting. Now the pedestrian and the bicycle network, because they're still lagging, I think we try to focus a little bit more on gaps. It's really important that we fill in gaps more than improve performance at the moment. So we currently have, in terms of the pedestrian network, this TFP will reduce gaps for 5 miles, probably a little bit more because we have that reserve, but at least 5 miles. And that takes us from a 12% gaps in the system to 8% gaps in the system. So now we can start to talk about, if we wanted to fill 100% of the gaps, that's what we would need to find funding for. And so this really helps understand the numbers of the amount of resources that we have, how far can we get in meeting our goals and the gaps that we have in the system. And then bicycle, same way, we are able to reduce it with this TFP 8 miles. So from 24% of the system, I believe Bellevue is truly lagging in bicycle network more than anything else. We're way behind on our bicycle plans. And so we have 24% of the system is a gap. So we're able to reduce it to 18% of what our planned system would be by introducing those 8 miles of bicycles. So we can start to see and talk about our transit network in this more quantitative way and understand how it will improve in the measures that we've spent a year in the commission discussing and fine-tuning and making sure that they're the right measures for our city and that are moving our network forward. So this was is just a little extra thing we wanted to share. I personally wanted to share with you to show a little preview of what this might look like in the future when we are using the MLOS and the Mobility Implementation Plan for the TFP evaluation.
Thank you, Chair Marciante. So what we're seeking tonight is your direction on whether this project list is a good basis for us to proceed with the TFP update process.
Okay. Let me see if there's any comments or questions on that. So you can see in your packet, option 1, we're deciding whether we want to move forward with that or modify it or not. So any comments or questions? And what's Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Robertson, followed by Councilmember Stokes.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate all of the work and hearing my colleagues add comments to this. When I was thinking about the bike network, I know it's been several years since I was on the Transportation Commission. I know one of the goals was 2 north-south and 2 east-west routes for the bicycle network. So the reduction from the 24% to the 18, does that actually get us to the 2 north-south, 2 east-west is one question. And then my second one is, I agree to move forward with this. I would still like to better understand from a Vision Zero standpoint, whether the kind of funds that we have proposed in there would be sufficient. I believe when we increased the Vision Zero funding 2.5 years ago in our budget, we talked about having Vision Zero updates to the council. And so maybe that's a separate discussion. But I do think that as we look at TFP, getting a broader understanding of how all this works together as part of Vision Zero will be important. So those are my 2 questions.
So for Vision Zero, what we did was we took the council's allocation of funding for the first 7 years in the CIP, and we extended that out for the remaining 6 years in the TFP. So that was our working assumption of what the council had said we want, and in the absence of additional, like you say, information of what's needed to pursue Vision Zero at whatever level the council wants, we use that as our basis. So we may have better information in the coming months or year, but that's our assumption at this point. With regard to the north, south, and east, west connections, we currently have 1 complete north, south, and 1 complete east, west. The proposed TFP network will, it doesn't fully fund. We will not have full allocation to complete another east-west one. That would be either the Mountains to Sound route or the Lake to Lake route. We've got allocations to fund pieces of that, but not to complete the connection. So we've got, those are basically, if we go back to the map, we have the, the light colors on some of those segments, not the dark color. And similarly on the north-south, we get close, but we don't fully complete another north-south one either. There's a couple that we're getting closer on, the middle along 140th, and then along West Lake Sammamish Parkway. Again, we make an incremental progress, but not the full piece.
Okay, so maybe it goes back to what Councilmember Stokes talked about earlier, which is when we look at our need, what is our true need for our transportation? And I think that you also brought up the fact that of all of the modes and the work, the bike network is the most behind. So whether as we look at the TFP, we can get a better sense of the gap and what funding is needed, and then looking at whether there's additional sources of funds that we could look at to be able to accelerate the work. Maybe it's another TIFIA loan. We just refinanced our last one, and USDOT just published an article saying that they refinanced our TIFIA. And so maybe that's another opportunity as we look forward to really where we want to go with having that connectivity. Thanks.
And Mike, I'm just gonna jump in here for a second, say, I realize that we have predetermined north, south, and east, west routes, but just because I know the Southeast 8th one so well, just by completing that, you will have a complete east-west route, a second one, just by completing that project. It won't be the same one that you have proposed, but that will safely get you east-west completely by connecting two other routes. So maybe we need to be looking at some other projects that would, fill in until we can do the proposed full route that you have in your project list.
And I would just point out that actually is part of this proposed set of projects are the East Bellevue Bicycle Network and the South Bellevue Bicycle Network. And that's precisely to get at this opportunity that you've pointed out, which is, we've identified for so many years, key corridors. We want to do major capital investments to make it multimodal at the level of service that we would like to see. And yet, we haven't been able to move the needle on some of those, some important ones. And so by instead taking a more kind of flexible approach and looking at opportunities, how can we create connections between origins and destinations without necessarily, needing to wait for major capital investments? That's the approach that was taken with the Growth Corridor Bicycle Network that the council included in the CIP, and which we've also now included in the TFP, of course. But the staff proposed and the commission agreed to incorporate that same sort of approach for East Bellevue and for South Bellevue.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. I initially raised my hand I thought when the discussion was done, I was going to make the motion, but this has been a great discussion. I think that it's really exciting to see the layers of work that are being done both within and without Bellevue, with the multimodal level of service, concurrency standards being updated, the mobility implementation plan and having the TFP, which was ahead of those two processes slightly, then get screened back through that multimodal level and seeing how it really did true up and was pretty good through that process, or showed well, the project showed well. And so the TFP is the revenue constraint plan. Of course, the TIP is not revenue constrained, and anything on the TIP, which is more than what's on this list, is eligible for grant funding. And so we're going to be grappling with, just to give context on what of the TFP to fund in the next capital budget. But remember, there's regional money out there, and the Transportation Policy Board at the Puget Sound Regional Council, I just finished my work on the project selection task force, which creates the new screening mechanism that is then moving forward through the Transportation Policy Board this year. And there, for example, one of the things that's going to be heightened there is safety projects. So by using this screening at the Bellevue level for safety, just take that for example, or for pet or for bike, it makes us much more aware and much more competitive to be able to get other people's money on the regional basis from the federal grants through the PSRC. So I think that all of these things, if you think about it in the bigger picture to get our arms around, this is a really important piece of it. And it's very much in line with a lot of the goals of Vision Zero and making sure our ped bike plan goes forward, making sure our transit master plan goes forward. It's, making sure that we, serve the growth. I think all of that really is dovetailing very nicely. And I know Councilmember Stokes wanted to speak, but I would love to make the motion to direct staff to move this forward when the time is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
I'll second that for you. I think Councilmember Robertson has a good point on that. And I served on that committee several years ago now, but it is, again, it's an example of we're always continuing and regionally and otherwise in reviewing these things, new things come up, and we have to keep that in mind. The other factor is, what happens in the legislature and all. The good thing about this is we have this plan and we're going forward. We know what the gaps are. And as, Mayor Robertson raised, there's some things we've been talking about doing for a long time, and why can't we get them done? And so I think the kind of message out on this is that Bellevue and the council and staff, the commission and all are working together on this. And this is not a, when we bake this cake, it's not, we don't put it in a bell jar or something. This is something we look at all the time going forward. So I think what we've seen tonight, and I hope the people who are watching this understand on this transportation stuff, we are really working to keep moving along. As I said, my biggest thing and excited about is the opportunities Bellevue has going forward. And this is one we can really do well in. And I'm ready to support and vote for that, because I think, again, the commission and staff have done a tremendous job of providing us with an overall plan, and I'm looking forward to implementing this thing. So,
okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. Councilmember Robertson, would you like to make the motion?
I would, thank you. I move to direct the Transportation Commission and staff to proceed with the TFP process and undertake any required environmental analysis based on the project list included with the Transportation Commission transmittal memo dated October 28th, 2021.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. And again, Chair Marciante, thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this. Really appreciate it, and the commission. We are going to take a break at 7:21. We will reconvene at 7:30. Okay, Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the next study session item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. The next item is with regard to potential sewer, water, and stormwater feed code changes. Just by way of background, the Bellevue Utilities has been partnering with a regional coalition for housing, also known as ARCH, to apply for state grant funding in order to waive connection fees for new shelters and affordable housing projects. Tonight, we are seeking council direction to return with the appropriate ordinances which will enable the city to waive these connection fees. So joining us tonight is Nav Otto, the director of our utilities department, to take us through this. Nav, turn it over to you.
Good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and council members. So tonight we are here to review with you an affordable housing grant opportunity. And this is something that we're partnering with ARCH on, and there are some related code changes to maximize our opportunity to pursue this grant. We've got a pretty tight timeline on this. The actual application is due on January 7th. So that's why we're bringing this to you. You don't need to take action on the legislation changes, but we do need direction on going forward on this. So. Sorry, I just messed with my computer. Bad thing to do. Yeah. Tonight we're going to be looking for direction from you on two pieces of legislation. One is to establish a program to waive direct connection fees for new shelters and affordable housing projects. And this is contingent on available non-utility rate revenue, rate funds, non-utility funds to cover the amount waived. The second thing we were looking to do is to modify the city's capital recovery charges, which also called CRCs, to create an option for prepayment of these costs. And both of these need to be done by making code changes. So this is kind of the overview of the items that we'll be going through, a little bit of what the grant opportunity is, what our connection charges, and a description of our partnership and some of the eligibility requirements for the grant. So what is this grant opportunity? It is a State Department of Commerce has recently established this Connecting Housing to Infrastructure program called CHIP and grant that's for new affordable housing projects. There are two pieces to this grant. One is for connection charges waiver, and that's funded by the state capital budget. The second piece is for reimbursement of utility construction improvements related to the same kind of projects, but this is funded by the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. Tonight, we're going to focus primarily on the connection fees because this is where we need council action in order to benefit and take advantage of this grant. So before we go into the grant opportunity, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background on what are connection charges and give you a little bit of context. So connection charges go by a number of names, but they all mean the same thing. It's a utility fee to serve the demands of new development. And this is, and connection fees are one of the tools used by utilities to ensure that growth pays for growth. In Bellevue, new development is subject to three different types of charges. The first type is connection fees that are imposed by Bellevue. And we have two types of connection fees. One is capital recovery charges or CRCs, and we charge these to developing properties to reimburse the general ratepayer for growth-related water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure of sort of general benefit. These fees are administered over, charged over a 10-year period, and they appear on the customer's utility bill. The second type of Bellevue-centric connection charge is what we call direct facility connection charge. And this is same thing for growth-related projects, but where the benefit is directly to a particular piece of property. And these are one-time fees, and they're paid at the time of development. The second type of connection fees, shown here in the middle kind of a chart, called Cascade capital facility charges, are a pass-through of Cascade connection charges. These are paid up front by the developer to Bellevue, and we turn around and pay these to Cascade. The third type of connection fee is King County sewer capacity charges, which are billed by King County directly rather than passed through City of Bellevue. And these charges can be over 15 years, but they have the option of paying off these charges as a lump sum at an earlier opportunity, like at any time during that 15-year period. So one correction I wanted to make to the information that you have in your agenda memo is some new information we got just today. Our initial information from King County was that they were not eligible for this grant opportunity. But just today, the King County staff has notified us that they believe that they're now eligible to participate in this grant. And so we will be coordinating with them on how they can partner with us on this application that we will be pursuing. So for the purpose of the rest of this discussion, we're going to be focused on connection fees that are billed by Bellevue. And these are the first two, the blue and the teal, the CRCs and the capital Cascade charges. Next, let me describe a little bit about the CHIP grant and what are our opportunities. In our initial assessment, we've identified 3 projects to apply for this grant. We submitted the pre-application materials last week for all 3 of these projects, and heard from Commerce already that the East Side Men's Shelter project does not qualify because transitional housing is excluded from this grant. But we are still pursuing the other 2 projects for this grant funding. And it could be, if our application is approved, it could be a significant benefit to the project, up to about $2 million in Bellevue and Cascade charges for the 2 projects combined could be reimbursed through this grant. Additionally, King County sewer connections charges may be reimbursable, and we will work with King County to see how they can partner with us on that. And in addition to these, some utility construction costs may be eligible for reimbursement. We're currently working with ARCH to determine if there are any such costs related to these 2 projects. So the CHIP grant is a new program for Commerce, and the timeline is very compressed. Applications, like I said, are due this week. January 7th is the final due date. And the reason that we are bringing this to you just now is that actually the eligibility requirements were still being clarified just a few weeks ago. So this is kind of hot off the presses, and we want to leverage this opportunity as soon as we can. This slide shows you some of the key requirements for the CHIP grant. And ARCH projects are eligible under this grant, but there are 2 requirements. Well, let me go through all 5 requirements. First of all, the applicant, it has to be the city, county, or a public utility district. And we partner with the developer to help them with the apply for, but the application agency is us. It is for new multifamily low-income affordable housing. And the program is to waive connection charges, and that's using state funds. That's one type of cost that can be reimbursed. The second type of cost that can be reimbursed is utility improvements necessary for the project. And these are federal funds, as I mentioned. The timeline is that the construction must begin within 24 months, and connection charges must be invoiced by middle of next year. So you can see, and this becomes relevant as we talk about why we need changes that we do need. So there are 2 proposed code changes that we need to address these issues. One is that the city must create a connection charge waiver program in order to be eligible for the grant. The second is that in order to allow property owners to prepay CRCs that right now are paid over 10 years, we want to make sure that we're maximizing the grant opportunity by having the project have the opportunity to prepay the entire 10 years worth of connection charges. So these are some of the key elements of the waiver program. Obviously, our key objectives are that we meet the grant requirements and that we are supporting the reduction of affordable housing project costs, that we are meeting that while being true to the city's policy of growth pays for growth and maintaining self-supporting utilities. The program criteria are that the waiver program must be adopted by ordinance, and shelters and affordable housing projects are eligible for this, and provided we have non-utility rate funds available to cover the waived fees. The second item that we need to make some changes on is the CRC payment in full option. The current code has the CRCs paid over 10-year period. And there is no prepayment opportunity in our current code. So the proposed code changes would allow us to maximize, like I said, the CHIP grant opportunity. And because this will enable payment or grant reimbursement for the entire 10-year period if the project is acceptable. And even otherwise, this provides the customer the flexibility. We've heard from customers from time to time, because this is like a very small charge on their utility every month. And some customers prefer to prepay these charges. And right now they don't have that opportunity. So tonight we're looking for council direction to return with legislation in a few weeks to, one, establish a program to waive water, sewer, and stormwater connection charges for new shelters and affordable housing projects, and two, modify the city's CRC program to create option for prepayment of those fees.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm really excited that this is coming before us. I think we're all interested in this. I will take hands. If you raise your hand, let me know if you want to make a comment or have a question. I see Councilmember Stokes has his hand up. So I'll start with him, and then Deputy Mayor, and then Councilmember Zahn. I'm not seeing Councilmember Lee for some reason. Oh, he's ducked down there. Okay, so hold on for just a sec. Sorry.
Would you like me to stop sharing? Oh, there you go. Charmaine.
No, it was my fault. Actually, it was Councilmember Lee was ducked. Okay, sorry, just a sec. Councilmember Robertson, did you have your hand up? Councilmember Barksdale, did you have your hand up?
I'm happy to make a comment when it's my turn. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Lee, did you have your hand up? Yes, okay. All right, Councilmember Stokes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very exciting. Nav and staff, her staff have been working with, actually Cascade has looked at this two or 3 years ago. We had some consultants for some reason from Texas A&M who know a lot about and working on equity and working with low income people in terms of how can we help. And this is one of the issues we talked about, and and either reducing these fees or eliminating them. And of course it's one of those things, as Nav knows, it impacts our overall costs. So just doing it without any extra help from funding would be a difficult thing. But we talked about it and had some conversations on this. So my point is, this is exciting if we can get if there's funding for this, and it's something that we we should start talking together on this, and how we could this may actually move Cascade and the other cities involved to do this. And this would be a substantial thing for helping affordable housing. So I'm very excited about it, and I think it's something that we can, we have some synergy that we can work on, and then if we can do it in Bellevue and work on this, we can work on the other cities around us as well. So it's a great thing. So Nav, we need to set a meeting up and kind of talk about this and move forward on it.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, first of all, I want to echo the enthusiasm for this program. It's fantastic, and thank you, Nav, for working so quickly with your outstanding team to bring this opportunity before us, and for staying on top of it, even under very tight timelines, it sounded like. But certainly, this is an opportunity that we do not want to miss. So, thank you so much for all your efforts and your team efforts, and for the presentation tonight. It's outstanding. I don't think any of my colleagues are going to have an issue with moving this forward tonight. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Probably the easiest vote we're going to take all year, for sure. But great work. And my only question that I had in some of your or your team's discussion with the Commerce Department on this is, given that I believe, if I remember correctly, the numbers in your presentation, that it has to be invoiced by June of 2023. Is there any appetite that they've mentioned so far that if construction has not begun within that 24-month period, that we could be looking at renewing a program such as this. In fact, maybe this is even something that we add to our ledge agenda, that if we're looking for another tool to help create more affordable housing, multifamily affordable housing, that this is a great tool and we should be embracing this and continuing it past the 2023. So just curious if that was brought up at all, if you see that as an opportunity.
We are not aware of it. We did not follow up on that. So our research didn't go that far. But we can certainly follow up with Commerce. What I do know is that this is the first wave of applications, and we wanted to be in the first wave. That's why the rush to get this in, because literally they're still defining the program. And we said, okay, we can't miss the deadline. The first deadline was January 3rd, today, and we actually submitted, and that was the pre-application. And we did that last week, and so that we would meet this deadline. And that was just to even know if we were eligible. And that's where we knew that the shelter was not eligible for this funding. But so it's very early stages. And I think they're really working out the details, but we wanted to be in on this first wave of applications.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nav.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I agree. This is excellent work to align ourselves so we can, take advantage of state funding as much as possible to reduce the cost to build affordable housing. And so I agree that to the degree that there's an appetite at the legislature to extend the program or have it be something that is funded for multi-years, that we should be advocating for that as much as we can. I did have a question. So the way that the policy we're going to be adopting is worded is that the fees will be waived provided that there is rate revenue available to pay for it. So when we make this change, are we saying then that if this grant funding is not available, we would be looking at other general fund or other sources of funding to help support these kind of waivers? Or can you help me understand that part?
I think it's that we would do this if there is non-utility resources available. That can be grants, that can be other sources of money. Because the reason for that is that if that isn't available, this becomes a rate driver for the rest of the rate base. So that's why from our research, most entities that have this kind of program, it's funded by other sources rather than utility rate revenues.
Okay, so it's an opportunity for us to put this in place. There's the state funds potentially available. And if we see that this is something that's very helpful, we could talk about what we might want to do ourselves if that is something of interest, because we do know that housing is less and less affordable to build and more challenging. So, okay, thank you.
So Nav, I know we're not discussing this much tonight, but the part that talks about utility improvements for affordable housing projects, the one thing that I am concerned about is when we talk about putting in affordable detached dwelling units in our existing homes and neighborhoods, I worry about some of the old infrastructure. And so if one of those were to qualify as affordable housing, could that then qualify for utility improvements to support the demand on the infrastructure?
So right now, the program that's in place is for multifamily. It is for multifamily, low-income affordable housing. So, the utility infrastructure we're talking about is either directly to that project, like side sewer or that kind of thing, or if there needed to be utility upgrades in order to make that happen. So that's, but it is really, the program is for multifamily housing.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, thank you for answering that. Councilmember Robertson, followed by Barksdale, and then Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. So I just really wanted to just give a strong kudos for to Nav and the team and the her department as well as the city manager's office. Wow, this that people complain about how slow government moves, and we have this. It comes up. There's these super short deadlines. The leadership, staff leadership knows that council would be all over this. And what do over Christmas break and New Year's? They put this together and put it on our agenda for January 3rd. I mean, wow. Yes, 2 thumbs way up. Support bringing this forward. I just really wanted to speak because this is just such an example of the excellence of the people who work for the city of Bellevue. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. No, thank you to you and your staff for bringing this to council. I think it's awesome, as has already been mentioned, any chance we can remove barriers for affordable housing. I did have one clarifying question. Is there an AMI level, or how is affordable housing defined in the context of this grant?
Yes, there are income requirements, and I will get back to you on that because I was given that information, but I have lost it. But
Okay.
there is a definition of affordable housing and it's a certain percentage of AMI. And I'm actually going to see. I told Andy, who has been with us only for a couple of months, that I wouldn't put him on the spot. But Andy, if you have an answer, would you mind unmuting yourself and joining us? Thank you, Andy.
Certainly. Happy to respond to that. For the grant for eligibility, it must be 80% of AMI. For the 2 projects that we have that are eligible, they are at, I believe, 50% and 60% of AMI, and that will help the scoring of those projects in the application process.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank
Andy.
you.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I fully agree with Councilmember Robinson's comment about our staff. I mean, they are right on, and they're right on the topic when they feel that it's beneficial to the city. And this obviously is very important important question, affordable housing. Actually, we all know how important it is to make the cost of housing low. So this is all good. But out of all this enthusiasm, I just want to, ask one question, not to throw cold water or anything, but it's reality. If the Commerce and others have money for us, we can pay for the costs of it's not, the city's not paying for it. We're getting a grant, okay? So if we have a grant, we do it, that's great. It's something we enable the affordable housing. What if the grant is not there? Are we committed that anybody who wants this is going to come out of the city's budget? Do we have then to include in our city budget in the future to make this work? That's the first question. Yeah. The second one is in relation to actually Councilmember John Stokes mentioned about Cascade Water Alliance. Actually had talked about this, people who are on low income and what kind of program do we have, to help them to mitigate the costs of doing all that stuff. And I think each city has their own program, obviously, and maybe some of them don't. So how is entity like Cascade Water Alliance apply that? And if we also have that, how is that going to work together? So there's some questions that need to be answered. Or that's what I'm asking. And so number one, I comment you jump into it, but at the same time, I understand government is slow, but hey, that's what we're supposed to do. We got to look at all the aspect of it so that we're not just doing it for the sake of, wow, what a wonderful thing we can do. Well, that's our responsibility to the public. So if now you can answer those 2 questions, I think that'd be good.
Sure. So that's why there are the program has the definition of that it is for when there are funds available from grants or other sources, and it would be the if so this specific change is broad enough that it can be it is council's decision on any future project if there aren't any funds available on whether you want to find some other alternate funding or not. But what we wanted to do was right now there is this money available, there are these projects, so it was a perfect alignment to say this was kind of like a no-brainer. And as far as the Cascades program was concerned, what I know about the Cascade program was really it would be, I'm not exactly sure where it went, but really the connection charges are levied by they're collected by their jurisdictions. For example, we collect the charges. People don't go to Cascade for development charges. So I'm not exactly sure how Cascades program would have worked. Maybe Councilmember Stokes has some idea, but these like this is something that the city is applying on behalf of the projects. Yeah.
Councilmember Stokes, did you want to add something there? Are you speaking? I think you're muted still.
Yeah, well, as I said, let's we'll look at this. I guess, yeah, it is. I guess the cities collect on behalf of Cascade on those fees, or yeah, it's part of the whole deal. The issue we had, of course, was how do we replace those resources, and but I think there's a lot of interest in doing this, and it's something that this may be a good catalyst for this going forward. So we need to talk about it and see what we can do. And I think it's very positive, and us taking and you taking the leadership on this and jumping out there on it is going to be very, very helpful. And I don't know what the other cities around us are doing at this point, but I'm sure they're looking at this as well. And it's one of these things that somewhere down the line, as I think the Deputy Mayor mentioned, is we may look at other ways to continue this, even if this particular one doesn't go forward, because again, it's something that could really help us with affordable housing. It's just another one of those costs of building housing that we have to deal with. So I think it's very, very positive, and I look forward to us working on this and see what we can do.
I think we all agree with that. So is there a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to direct staff to return with appropriate ordinances to amend the city's relevant codes to establish a program to waive water, sewer, and stormwater connection charges for new shelters and affordable housing projects, and modify the city's capital recovery charges to create an option for prepayment of fees.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Boy, I think that's a great way to start off the year. Really do. Okay, well, that's the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.